The gate agent looked at Marcus Williams and said the words that would destroy her career. "Sir, are you sure you can afford first class?" Security personnel were dragging him off the plane while 200 passengers recorded the entire incident. The flight crew was laughing. The captain refused to help. But none of them knew who Marcus really was. 12 minutes later, Marcus Williams walked back on that same aircraft as the CEO who owned the entire airline. The gate agent who questioned his ticket, fired on the spot. The flight attendant who called security, terminated in front of everyone. The captain who authorized his removal, career over. But here's the part that will blow your mind. Marcus didn't just fire them. He restructured the entire airline's policies, created a multi-million-dollar discrimination fund, and sparked industry-wide changes that are still happening today. The phone call that ended their careers was heard by hundreds of passengers and went viral within hours. And the investors who were waiting for Marcus in Los Angeles? They doubled their offer from $500 million to $1 billion after seeing how he handled corporate discrimination. This is a true story at 12 minutes that changed the entire aviation industry forever. Make sure you hit subscribe right now, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice and show you exactly what happens when corporate power meets moral courage. I guarantee you've never heard anything like this. Marcus Williams lives in a quiet Chicago neighborhood where he waters his garden every morning at 5 a.m. before reviewing market reports for his business empire worth $2.8 billion. But those certificates on his office wall tell a story most people would never guess from looking at him. Harvard MBA, 1995, where he wrote his thesis on airline operational efficiency that would later revolutionize the industry. Aviation Industry CEO of the Year, 2018. Keynote speaker at the Global Aviation Summit, 2020, where he predicted many of the changes that airlines are implementing today. But here's what those photos don't show. Marcus Williams is the CEO and majority owner of SkyBridge Airlines, the parent company that owns 15 different airlines, including Premier Air, the airline that was about to make the most expensive customer service mistake in aviation history. Marcus started with absolutely nothing. Born in Detroit to a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. He learned early that success meant working twice as hard as everyone else and never taking anything for granted. His mother, Gloria, cleaned office buildings at night, scrubbed floors in corporate towers, and did laundry for wealthy families, never imagining her son would one day own the companies inside those buildings she cleaned. In high school, Marcus worked at Detroit Metro Airport, cleaning planes and loading baggage during the overnight shift. While other kids saw this as grunt work to be avoided, Marcus saw it as an opportunity to learn everything about airline operations from the ground up. He studied every aspect of how planes move through airports, asking questions about fuel efficiency, passenger flow patterns, crew scheduling, maintenance protocols, and baggage handling systems. His relentless curiosity and work ethic caught the attention of supervisors who began giving him additional responsibilities. A full scholarship based on his academic excellence and essays about aviation innovation got him to Northwestern University for aerospace engineering. Student loans, part-time jobs, and the savings from airport work got him through 4 years of intensive study. But Marcus dreamed bigger than just fixing planes or designing aircraft components. He wanted to revolutionize how airlines operated, making them more efficient, more profitable, and more customer-focused. His senior project on reducing aircraft turnaround times impressed Professor David Chun, who had extensive connections throughout the aviation industry from his previous career as a Boeing executive. Professor Chun recognized Marcus's unique combination of hands-on operational experience and theoretical knowledge, understanding that this combination was rare in young engineers. That connection led to Marcus's first professional job at United Airlines as a junior operations analyst, starting at $45,000 per year. For 5 years, he worked 18-hour days, arriving at the office before dawn and leaving after midnight, studying every inefficiency, every bottleneck, every missed opportunity in United's massive operation. His recommendations saved United millions of dollars in operational costs, reduced delays, and improved customer satisfaction scores. His analysis of hub-and-spoke routing systems identified over $50 million in annual savings. His crew scheduling optimization reduced overtime costs by 30%. His passenger flow recommendations cut average boarding times by 8 minutes per flight. But while United's executives were impressed with his work, Marcus was already planning something bigger. He wasn't content working for airlines. He wanted to own them. Harvard Business School changed everything for Marcus. Not just a world-class education, though he graduated summa cum laude with the highest honors, but the network of connections, the exposure to venture capital, and the understanding that in business, vision and execution mattered more than background or where you came from. His thesis on airline operational efficiency became legendary among professors and students, and would later become the operational foundation for what would become SkyBridge Airlines. After Harvard, Marcus received offers from Goldman Sachs Investment Banking, McKinsey Consulting, and several Fortune 500 companies that his classmates would have killed for. Instead, he took his $50,000 in savings, moved back to Chicago, and started Williams Aviation Consulting from a one-bedroom apartment, working from a folding table he bought at Walmart. His first client was a struggling regional carrier called Air Texas, based in Houston. The airline had 6 aging planes, $50 million in debt, terrible on-time performance, and was hemorrhaging money every day. The CEO hired Marcus as a last resort, giving him 60 days to either turn things around or help them prepare for bankruptcy. Marcus lived in Houston for 2 months, working 20-hour days, analyzing every aspect of Air Texas operations. He discovered that their route planning was inefficient. Their crew scheduling created massive overtime costs. Their maintenance procedures caused unnecessary delays, and their customer service training was non-existent. Within 6 months of implementing Marcus's recommendations, Air Texas's on-time performance improved from 60% to 94%. Its operational costs dropped by 35%. Customer satisfaction scores doubled, and became profitable for the first time in 4 years. Word of this turnaround spread rapidly throughout the aviation industry. Soon, Marcus was consulting for major airlines across the country. American Airlines hired him to optimize its Dallas hub operations, saving them $75 million annually. Delta brought him in to redesign their Atlanta hub passenger flow, reducing connection times and improving customer experience. Southwest consulted with him on route optimization that opened up 12 new profitable markets. His company, Williams Aviation Consulting, grew from one man in a Chicago apartment to a team of 50 aviation experts generating $100 million annually in revenue. Marcus's reputation as the industry's top operational efficiency expert was solidified, but he still had bigger plans. During the 2008 to 2010 recession, when the airline industry was devastated and many carriers were declaring bankruptcy, Marcus saw this crisis as the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Small regional carriers were selling their routes, aircraft, and airport gates for pennies on the dollar. Marcus used his consulting profits and his network of investor relationships to start acquiring these struggling airlines. His first acquisition was Air Midwest, the same struggling Texas carrier that had been his first consulting client. By this time, it had grown to 12 aircraft, but was again facing financial difficulties due to fuel price spikes and increased competition. Marcus bought the entire airline for $15 million, a fraction of what the aircraft alone were worth. Using the operational systems he developed through years of consulting, Marcus restructured Air Midwest's operations completely. New route planning increased aircraft utilization from 8 hours per day to 11 hours per day. Improved crew scheduling reduced labor costs by 25%. Better maintenance planning increased aircraft availability from 85% to 96%. Customer service training transformed passenger satisfaction scores. Within 2 years, Air Midwest was not only profitable, but was generating $50 million in annual revenue with 15% profit margins. Marcus had proven that his operational methods could not only fix struggling airlines, but transform them into highly profitable enterprises. Then came Mountain Air, a failing Denver-based carrier with beautiful routes through the Rocky Mountains, but terrible operational efficiency. Marcus bought it for $25 million and applied the same transformation process. Coastal Express, a Florida-based airline serving beach destinations, came next for $35 million. Prairie Sky Airlines, covering Midwest routes, followed for $40 million. Each acquisition followed the same pattern. Marcus would identify struggling airlines with good route networks but poor operations, buy them at distressed prices, implement his proven efficiency systems, and transform them into profitable ventures. But he didn't just fix operations. He revolutionized their customer service, invested heavily in employee training, and built a corporate culture where every passenger was treated with dignity and respect regardless of their background or appearance. By 2015, Marcus had created SkyBridge Airlines as a holding company for his growing aviation empire. 15 airlines operating under different brand names. 400 aircraft serving routes to 200 cities, employing 25,000 people, generating $8 billion in annual revenue. From that teenager cleaning planes in Detroit, Marcus had become one of the most powerful figures in American aviation. But remarkable success never changed Marcus's fundamental character or his memory of what it felt like to be overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed because of how he looked or where he came from. That's exactly why every SkyBridge Airlines subsidiary had the most comprehensive diversity and inclusion training programs in the entire industry. Their customer service standards explicitly emphasize treating every passenger with equal respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance, background, or economic status. Marcus flew commercial constantly, often on his own airline, sometimes in first class, but frequently in economy just to experience what his customers experienced firsthand. He would take detailed notes, observe crew interactions with passengers, and make sure his high standards were being maintained at every level of operation throughout his airline network. This brings us to Tuesday, March 15th, 2024, a date that would become infamous in aviation history. Marcus was traveling from Chicago O'Hare to Los Angeles International Airport for a crucial board meeting with potential investors who were considering a $500 million expansion of Premier Air's West Coast operations, including new routes to Asia and updated aircraft purchases. The flight should have been completely routine, just 3 hours in first class on Premier Air, one of SkyBridge's premium airline subsidiaries known for excellent service and operational reliability. Marcus had personally overseen Premier Air's transformation from a struggling regional carrier into one of the most respected airlines in the industry. That morning, Marcus dressed in his typical comfortable travel attire, well-fitted jeans, a simple navy blue button-down shirt, and his favorite Chicago Cubs baseball cap. After 20 years of constant business travel, he had learned to prioritize comfort over formality, especially for cross-country flights where he would be working on his laptop for most of the journey. His boarding pass, printed by his assistant the previous evening, clearly showed Seat 2A in first class, along with his Premier Elite Platinum status that he'd maintained for over a decade. Everything appeared completely normal as he grabbed his leather carry-on bag, containing his laptop and presentation materials for the investor meeting, and headed to O'Hare International Airport. Now, before we continue with what happened next, I want you to think about your own experiences. Have you ever been treated differently at an airport, in a restaurant, or at a store based on how you were dressed? Have you ever felt judged by service staff before they even knew who you were or what you could afford? Drop a comment below and share your story, because Marcus's experience is about to show us exactly what happens when assumptions and stereotypes collide with reality in the most dramatic way possible. Marcus arrived at O'Hare at 1 p.m. for his 3 p.m. departure, giving himself plenty of time despite being a frequent traveler who could navigate the airport quickly. The airport was busy with typical Tuesday afternoon business travel volume, but nothing unusual. He used the automated kiosk to print his boarding pass, though he already had the mobile version on his phone, and headed through the TSA pre-check security line. His pre-check status, earned through years of frequent travel and background verification, got him through security efficiently. By 1:30 p.m., he was at Gate B12 in Terminal 1, settling into a seat near the boarding area and opening his laptop to review his presentation slides one final time before the crucial investor meeting. Premier Air Flight 447 to Los Angeles was being operated by a Boeing 737-800, one of the most reliable aircraft in commercial aviation, configured with 16 first-class seats featuring extra legroom and premium meal service, plus 144 economy seats. The aircraft was less than 3 years old and represented the kind of modern, efficient fleet that Marcus had insisted on when Premier Air updated its equipment. The crew assigned to Flight 447 that day consisted of Captain Robert Hayes, a 15-year veteran pilot with Premier Air who prided himself on punctual departures and smooth flights. First Officer Jennifer Martinez, a skilled pilot with 8 years of commercial aviation experience, and 3 flight attendants who would play central roles in the unfolding drama. The lead flight attendant was Angela Thompson, who had been with Premier Air for 12 years and considered herself an expert in maintaining what she called the first-class experience. Angela was 42 years old, had worked her way up from economy class service, and took personal pride in ensuring that first class remained, in her words, an exclusive environment for appropriate passengers who understand luxury service. Unfortunately, Angela was having one of the worst days of her career. She had been passed over for promotion to purser for the 3rd time in 2 years, despite her seniority and experience. Her longtime boyfriend had unexpectedly broken up with her the previous evening via text message, and she was still dealing with a formal passenger complaint from her previous flight, where a customer had accused her of providing substandard service. The second flight attendant was David Chun, who, despite his surname, was not related to Marcus's former professor. David was 28 years old, relatively new to Premier Air, but not new to customer service, having worked for 2 competitor airlines for 3 years before joining Premier Air. He generally followed Angela's lead on passenger interactions, especially when it came to first-class service protocols. The third flight attendant was Sarah Williams, who shared Marcus's last name purely by coincidence. Sarah was the most junior member of the crew, having been with Premier Air for only 8 months, still learning procedures and protocols, and generally deferring to Angela's experience and authority in passenger service matters. At 2:30 p.m., Premier Air announced the beginning of boarding for Flight 447. Following standard airline protocol, they called first-class passengers and Premier Elite status members first. Marcus closed his laptop, gathered his carry-on bag, and approached the gate podium where Janet Morrison, the gate agent, was scanning boarding passes and checking passenger identification. Janet Morrison had been working for Premier Air for 7 years, having started as a customer service representative at the ticket counter and working her way up to gate agent. She took considerable pride in what she described as maintaining high standards at the gate and ensuring that only properly qualified passengers boarded in premium cabins. Janet was 35 years old, lived in a Chicago suburb, and considered herself an experienced professional who could quickly assess whether passengers belonged in first class or economy. Marcus approached Janet's podium and handed over his boarding pass along with his driver's license for identification verification. Janet glanced at the boarding pass, then looked up at Marcus, taking his casual attire and baseball cap, and then looked back down at the boarding pass with obvious skepticism. Her expression changed almost immediately from professional politeness to suspicious scrutiny. "Sir, I think there might be some kind of mistake with your boarding pass," Janet said, her tone already shifting from welcoming to questioning. Marcus looked at her with slight confusion, having never experienced this kind of challenge before in decades of flying. "I don't think so. C2A, first class, Flight 447 to Los Angeles." Janet examined the boarding pass more closely, holding it up to the light as if she were looking for signs of forgery or tampering. Her examination was theatrical and obvious to other passengers in line behind Marcus. This shows first-class seating, but I need to ask, did you personally purchase this ticket yourself? The implication of her question hit Marcus immediately and viscerally. The suggestion was unmistakably clear. Someone who looked like him, dressed as casually as he was, could not possibly have legitimately purchased a first-class airline ticket costing over $2,000. "Yes, I purchased this ticket through my company's corporate travel department, the same way I book all my business travel." Janet's suspicious expression deepened rather than being satisfied by a straightforward answer. "And what company would that be, sir?" Marcus felt a familiar, uncomfortable tightness in his chest that came with these types of confrontational situations, a feeling he knew well from decades of navigating professional environments where his presence was questioned. "I would prefer to discuss my employer privately if there's some specific issue with my ticket or identification." But Janet was not backing down from her interrogation. Other passengers were beginning to notice the unusual delay and starting to look curiously at the interaction between Marcus and the gate agent. Some were checking their phones for the time, worried about their own boarding process being delayed. "Sir, first-class tickets on this route cost $2,400 each. Are you certain you didn't mean to book an economy seat instead? Sometimes there are booking errors or misunderstandings about ticket types." Marcus maintained his composure despite feeling increasingly frustrated and humiliated by the very public questioning of his right to fly in first class. "I am completely certain. The ticket is valid. It belongs to me, and I would like to board the aircraft now." Instead of processing his boarding pass and allowing him to proceed, Janet picked up the phone at her podium and made a call. "Angela, this is Janet at the gate. I have a passenger here with what appears to be a first-class boarding pass, but I think there might be some kind of error or irregularity. Could you come out to the gate area to take a look at the situation?" Within 2 minutes, Angela Thompson appeared at the gate area, walking briskly from the aircraft with an expression that suggested she was prepared to deal with what she assumed would be a problematic passenger situation. She was a tall, blonde woman in her 40s who carried herself with the confidence and authority of someone accustomed to being in charge and making decisions about passenger seating. Angela looked at Marcus from head to toe, taking in his jeans, button-down shirt, and baseball cap, then looked at Janet with an expression that suggested she immediately understood the nature of the problem and was prepared to handle it efficiently. "What seems to be the issue here?" Angela asked, though her tone and body language suggested she had already made up her mind about the situation based on her visual assessment of Marcus. "This passenger has a boarding pass that shows first-class seating, but I wanted you to verify it personally before I allow him to board the aircraft," Janet explained, as if Marcus were not standing directly in front of them listening to every word of their conversation about him. Angela took the boarding pass from Janet and examined it with exaggerated thoroughness, turning it over, holding it up to examine the printing, and scrutinizing every detail as if she were a forensic document expert. This does appear to be a legitimate first-class boarding pass. Sir, I need to ask you directly, how exactly did you come to acquire this particular ticket?" The phrasing of her question was deliberately insulting, implying that Marcus had somehow obtained the ticket through improper means rather than through normal purchase channels. Marcus had spent decades dealing with these kind of condescending attitudes in professional settings, but he had learned to pick his battles carefully and maintain his composure under pressure. "I purchased it through my company's corporate travel account, the same way I book airline tickets every single week for my business travel," Marcus replied calmly but firmly. "And what company would that be?" Angela asked, echoing Janet's earlier question, but with even more skepticism in her voice. "I would rather not discuss my employer in a public setting like this. Is there some specific problem with my ticket or identification that we need to resolve?" Angela and Janet exchanged a meaningful look that communicated volumes about their shared assumptions and decision-making process. They had clearly decided, based purely on Marcus's appearance and attire, that he did not belong in first class, and they were determined to find some justification for preventing him from boarding. "Sir, as airline employees, we have both the right and the responsibility to verify any ticket that appears unusual or out of the ordinary," Angela said with officious authority. "Corporate travel tickets sometimes get mixed up. Employees sometimes use company tickets inappropriately for personal travel, and we need to verify the legitimacy of this purchase by calling your company directly. That verification is completely unnecessary," Marcus said with controlled firmness. "The ticket is completely valid. It's issued in my name. It matches my identification perfectly, and I need to board this flight to make an important business meeting in Los Angeles." But Angela was already turning to walk back toward the aircraft boarding door. "Janet, please do not allow this passenger to board until we can independently verify his ticket purchase through his employer. I'll be back in just a few minutes to resolve the situation." Marcus stood at the gate podium feeling increasingly frustrated and humiliated as other first-class passengers continued to board around him without any questioning or delays. He could feel their stares, their judgment, and their assumptions about why he was being detained while they proceeded smoothly onto the aircraft. Some passengers looked sympathetic to his obvious discomfort, while others seemed to agree with the airline staff's decision to question his ticket. One elderly white man in an expensive business suit shook his head disapprovingly and muttered loud enough for others to hear, "They really should check these things more carefully. You never know who's trying to scam their way into first class these days." After 10 more minutes of standing at the gate, While watching other passengers board, Angela returned, accompanied by Captain Robert Hayes. Robert Hayes was a 58-year-old veteran pilot who took considerable pride in maintaining what he called professional standards and running what he described as a tight ship with no tolerance for passenger disruptions or irregularities. Captain Hayes had heard Angela's version of the situation and had come to the gate prepared to support his crew's judgment and authority. In his mind, experienced flight attendants like Angela didn't question passengers without good reason, and he was ready to back their assessment of the situation. "Sir, I understand there's some confusion or irregularity regarding your boarding pass." Captain Hayes said with forced politeness that barely masked his assumption that Marcus was somehow in the wrong. "There's no confusion whatsoever on my part, Captain," Marcus replied respectfully but firmly. "I have a completely valid first-class ticket. I provided proper identification, and I simply need to board this aircraft to get to Los Angeles for a business meeting." "Well, we have strict company policies about verifying expensive tickets, especially in cases where they seem out of the ordinary or don't match our expectations," Captain Hayes said, unknowingly revealing the discriminatory basis for their actions. The phrase "out of the ordinary" hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus understood exactly what they meant. In their minds, a black man dressed casually with a first-class ticket was out of the ordinary, and therefore automatically suspicious and worthy of additional scrutiny. "Captain, I've been flying commercially for over 20 years. I fly first class regularly for business travel, and I have never encountered this type of situation before. What exactly do you consider out of the ordinary about my ticket or my presence here?" Captain Hayes looked increasingly uncomfortable, but remained committed to supporting his crew's decision. "Sir, we're simply following established security procedures and company policies. If you can provide some additional verification of your ability to purchase this ticket, we'll be happy to allow you to board immediately." The demand was both insulting and discriminatory. They were essentially requiring Marcus to prove that he could afford a ticket he had already legally purchased and paid for. Other passengers were now openly staring at the confrontation, some recording video with their smartphones, clearly sensing that something unusual and potentially problematic was unfolding. Marcus felt the weight of decades of similar treatment. The persistent assumption that his success must be fraudulent, that his presence in elite spaces must be some kind of mistake or deception, that he needed to prove his worthiness over and over again in situations where white passengers would never be questioned. "I am not providing any additional verification for a ticket that I have already purchased legally and legitimately," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly with controlled anger. "What you're demanding is discriminatory treatment based on your assumptions about my appearance, and it's completely unacceptable." The word discriminatory changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation immediately. Angela's face hardened with defensive anger. Captain Hayes straightened up with authority. Janet stepped backward, as if Marcus had made some kind of threat against her personally. "Sir, now you're making very serious accusations against our professional conduct," Angela said loudly, ensuring that other passengers and airport staff could clearly hear her response. "We are simply following standard security protocols and company policies. If you're unwilling to cooperate with reasonable verification procedures, we're going to have to ask you to leave the gate area." "I'm not leaving anywhere," Marcus replied firmly and clearly. "I have a valid ticket and a legal right to board this aircraft." Captain Hayes stepped forward with full authority. "Sir, I am the captain of this aircraft, and I have both the legal authority and the responsibility to deny boarding to any passenger who creates a disturbance or disruption. You are currently creating a disturbance. I am standing here calmly with a valid ticket asking to board. If you consider that a disturbance, then your definition of disturbance needs serious revision." But the crew had made their collective decision to remove Marcus from the situation rather than acknowledge their discriminatory behavior. Angela was already signaling to airport security personnel. Within just a few minutes, 2 uniformed security guards approached the gate area with serious expressions. "Officers, we have a passenger situation here," Captain Hayes explained to the security guards. "This individual is refusing to cooperate with our standard verification procedures and is making accusations against our crew while disrupting the boarding process for other passengers." The security guards looked at Marcus, then at the airline crew members, and made the same assumptions that everyone else had been making throughout this confrontation. They saw a black man in casual clothing who was apparently causing problems for uniformed airline staff, and they immediately knew whose side they were supposed to take in this conflict. "Sir, you need to come with us right now," the first security guard said with authority. "What I need is to board my flight with my valid ticket." Marcus replied calmly but firmly. "Sir, please don't make the situation any more difficult than it needs to be." Marcus looked around to crowd of passengers, crew members, and airport staff who had gathered to watch this confrontation unfold. Every face in that crowd told the same story. They had already decided that he was the problem in this situation. His presence in first class was the problem. His refusal to accept discriminatory treatment quietly was a problem. His insistence on being treated with basic dignity and respect was somehow the problem. But Marcus Williams had not built a $2.8 billion business empire by accepting other people's limitations or backing down when people underestimated his capabilities and authority. He had not revolutionized an entire industry by quietly accepting discrimination. And he was certainly not going to allow 3 airline employees to destroy his business plans and humiliate him publicly because they could not imagine a black man legitimately belonging in first class. As the security guards reached toward his arms to physically escort him away from the gate, Marcus pulled out his smartphone with a small, confident smile that suggested he had one final card to play in this confrontation. "Before you escort me anywhere, gentlemen, I need to make just one quick phone call. You don't mind if I contact my office about this situation, do you?" Angela rolled her eyes with exasperation and dismissive contempt. "Sir, you can make all the complaint calls you want from the terminal. You are not boarding this aircraft today." "Oh, but this particular phone call is specifically about Premier Air in this exact situation," Marcus said calmly while dialing a number from memory. "I think you're all going to want to hear this conversation." Captain Hayes laughed dismissively. "Sir, calling anyone to complain about our decision won't change anything at all. We've made our determination and it's final." But something in Marcus's tone, something in a sudden shift from frustrated passenger to confident authority figure, made Janet pause and reconsider the situation. For the first time since this entire confrontation had begun, she began to wonder if they might have made a serious mistake in their assessment and handling of this passenger. Marcus's call connected immediately, and he deliberately put the phone on speaker mode so that everyone in the gate area could clearly hear both sides of the conversation that was about to unfold. "Jennifer, this is Marcus Williams. I'm currently standing at gate B12 at O'Hare, and I need you to immediately conference in the Premier Air Operations Center. This is urgent." "Of course, Mr. Williams," came the immediate, crisp, professional response. "I'm connecting you right now." The crowd at the gate grew noticeably quieter as they listened to this exchange. Even the security guards hesitated in their actions. There was something about the immediate professionalism of that response, the instant recognition in the woman's voice, and a respectful tone that suggested this was not just another angry passenger making empty threats or pointless complaint calls. "Premier Air Operations Center. This is Director Mike Peterson speaking." A male voice came through the phone speaker system clearly. "Mike, this is Marcus Williams. I'm standing at gate B12 with what appears to be a very significant customer service failure involving Flight 447. I need to ask you directly, are you completely familiar with our company's diversity and inclusion protocols?" The immediate change in the crowd's demeanor was palpable and dramatic. Angela's face went completely pale. Captain Hayes stepped closer to the phone, suddenly very interested in hearing this conversation. Janet looked like she desperately wanted to disappear entirely. "Yes, sir, Mr. Williams, I'm absolutely familiar with all of our policies. Is there a specific problem that I need to address immediately?" "Mike, I am standing here with a completely valid first-class ticket for Flight 447, and your gate agent has refused to allow me to board the aircraft. Your lead flight attendant has demanded additional verification of my ability to pay for this ticket. Your captain has authorized airport security to physically remove me from the gate area. All of this is happening because they have decided, based purely on my appearance, that I don't look like someone who belongs in first class." The silence on both ends of the phone connection was absolutely deafening. When Director Peterson's voice returned, it was tight with barely controlled panic and professional urgency. Mr. Williams, I sincerely apologize for this completely unacceptable situation. There has obviously been a terrible misunderstanding and failure of our customer service standards. Can you please put the crew members involved on the phone so I can speak with them directly? Marcus looked directly at Captain Hayes with a calm but unmistakably authoritative expression. The captain is standing right here next to me. Would you like to speak with him directly? Captain Hayes suddenly looked like he would rather be absolutely anywhere else in the world than standing at gate B12. Excuse me, but who exactly am I speaking to right now? Director Peterson's voice came through the speakerphone clearly and was heard by everyone gathered in the gate area. Captain Hayes, you are currently speaking to Marcus Williams, who is the Chief Executive Officer and majority owner of SkyBridge Airlines, which is the parent company of Premier Air. He is also your ultimate boss and the person who signs your paychecks. But Marcus was not finished delivering his lesson in corporate accountability and justice. Mike, I'm going to need you to immediately conference in our legal department and our human resources director. This entire incident needs to be thoroughly documented for potential legal action. Right away, sir. I'm patching them in immediately. Within 30 seconds, 2 additional professional voices joined the conference call. Linda Chun from the legal department and Robert Davis from human resources, both of whom Marcus had personally hired and who reported directly to him. Marcus, what's the current situation? Linda's voice was all business and professional urgency. Linda, I need this entire conversation recorded for potential legal action and documentation purposes. I am a black passenger who has been denied boarding on one of our own flights due to clear racial profiling and discriminatory treatment. The crew demanded additional verification of my ability to pay for a ticket I had already legally purchased, accused me of potential booking fraud, and called airport security to have me physically removed when I refused to accept their discriminatory treatment. Robert Davis from Human Resources immediately jumped into the conversation. Mr. Williams, we will initiate a comprehensive investigation within the next hour. Can you please identify the specific crew members who were involved in this incident? Marcus looked directly at each crew member as he spoke their names clearly for the recording. Gate Agent Janet Morrison, Lead Flight Attendant Angela Thompson, and Captain Robert Hayes. All 3 of these employees participated directly in the decision to deny me boarding based entirely on their assumptions about my appearance and economic status. The silence that followed was broken by Director Peterson's voice, tight with professional urgency and damage control. Mr. Williams, those crew members are suspended from duty immediately pending a full investigation. I am personally coming to O'Hare right now to resolve the situation. That won't be necessary, Mike. Marcus said calmly and professionally. But I do on board this flight and continue to Los Angeles as originally planned. I have a scheduled meeting with investors who are considering a $500 million expansion of Premier Air's West Coast operations, including new routes and aircraft purchases. The bitter irony was not lost on anyone listening to this conversation. The airline crew who had tried to prevent Marcus from boarding the plane had nearly cost Premier Air $500 million in crucial investment funding. Captain Hayes finally found his voice, though it was shaking noticeably. Mr. Williams, I want to say that there's been a terrible misunderstanding here. Of course, you can board the aircraft immediately, first class, Seat 2A, exactly as your boarding pass indicates. But Marcus was not finished teaching his lesson in accountability and consequences. Captain Hayes, I'd like you to help me understand exactly what kind of misunderstanding occurred here. What specific aspect of a valid boarding pass and proper identification created confusion for you and your crew? Captain Hayes stammered and struggled to find words that would not further incriminate him or reveal the discriminatory basis of their actions. Well, sir, we were simply trying to follow what we thought were appropriate procedures. What procedures, specifically, require additional verification from black passengers that are not required from white passengers? Marcus asked directly. The question hung in the air like a legal indictment. Every person within earshot knew the answer to that question, but nobody wanted to say it out loud, because doing so would admit to discriminatory practices. Angela Thompson, now desperate to save her career and livelihood, stepped forward with obvious panic. Mr. Williams, I want to sincerely apologize for this entire situation. We made a terrible error in judgment, and I promise you it will never happen again." "You are absolutely correct, Angela," Marcus replied with calm authority. "It will never happen again because you no longer work for Premier Air. Mike, I want Angela Thompson terminated immediately for willful violation of our anti-discrimination policies." "Done," came Peterson's immediate reply through the speakerphone. Marcus then turned his attention to Janet Morrison. "Janet, you initiated this entire incident by questioning my right to fly first class based solely on your visual assessment of my appearance. You demanded to know my employer as if my casual attire made my expensive ticket automatically suspect. You called a flight attendant to verify what you assumed was impossible, that I could legitimately afford this seat." Janet was now crying openly, understanding that her career was ending in real time. "Mr. Williams, please. I have 2 young children at home, and I desperately need this job to support my family. You should have considered the welfare of your family before you decided to humiliate a paying customer based on racial assumptions and stereotypes," Marcus replied firmly. "Mike, Janet Morrison is also terminated from Premier Air, effective immediately." "Understood completely, sir," Peterson confirmed. Finally, Marcus turned to Captain Hayes for the most important part of his lesson. "Captain Hayes, you are actually the most disappointing person in this entire situation. As the senior crew member and the person with ultimate authority over this flight, you had both the power and professional responsibility to stop this discrimination before it escalated. Instead, you chose to validate it, support it, and authorize security to physically remove a paying passenger whose only crime was being black while attempting to fly first class." Captain Hayes looked absolutely desperate and panicked. "Mr. Williams, I was simply trying to support my crew and back their judgment. I honestly didn't realize the full implications of the situation." "You didn't realize that discrimination was wrong, Captain? You didn't realize that calling security on a black passenger for the crime of existing in first class might be legally and morally problematic? After 30 years in this industry, after completing all of our mandatory diversity training programs, you honestly didn't realize what you were doing." The public humiliation was complete and total, but Marcus had one final point to make for everyone listening. "Captain Hayes, you are suspended from all duties pending a comprehensive investigation by our Human Resources Department. Depending on the findings of that investigation, you'll either face extensive additional training and formal probation, or you'll be terminated from Premier Air. That decision will be made by our HR professionals based on their thorough review of this incident." Marcus ended the conference call and turned to address the crowd of stunned passengers, crew members, and airport staff who had witnessed this entire confrontation and its dramatic resolution. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed something that happens far more frequently than most people realize or want to acknowledge. Every single day, black passengers, Latino passengers, Asian passengers, and other travelers who don't fit certain narrow stereotypes are questioned, challenged, delayed, and humiliated by airline staff who make instant judgments based on appearance rather than treating all customers with equal dignity and respect." The crowd listened with complete attention, and several people nodded in recognition of similar experiences they had witnessed or personally endured. I was fortunate today because I had the corporate power to address this discrimination immediately and directly. Most passengers who face this type of treatment don't have that kind of power or authority. They suffer through humiliation silently, accept the discriminatory treatment, and walk away feeling angry, hurt, and powerless to create change. Marcus's voice grew stronger and more passionate as he continued. "But here's what I want everyone in this airport to understand clearly. My ability to afford first-class tickets is not what made this discrimination wrong or unacceptable. Even if I had been flying on the most basic economy ticket, even if I had been dressed in work clothes or casual attire, even if I had been taking my very first flight, I still would have deserved to be treated with basic human dignity and professional respect." Several passengers began applauding, and the message was clearly resonating throughout the crowd. Discrimination is equally wrong whether it happens to a corporate CEO or a college student, whether it happens to someone wearing a $1,000 business suit or someone in their everyday work uniform. Every single passenger deserves equal treatment, equal respect, and equal dignity from airline staff, regardless of their race, ethnicity, age, gender, or economic background. The applause grew significantly louder and more sustained. Even some of the airport security guards were nodding in agreement with Marcus's message. Marcus pulled out his phone one final time to complete his transformation of the situation. "Mike Peterson, are you still connected to this call?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Williams, I'm still here. I want you to immediately implement comprehensive additional bias training for all Premier Air staff members who have any contact with passengers. I want crystal clear written policy stating that any employee who profiles or discriminates against passengers based on appearance, race, ethnicity, or any other protected characteristic will face immediate termination. And I want a company-wide communication sent to every single employee today, reminding them that our passengers deserve respectful treatment regardless of their background, appearance, or perceived economic status. I'm already drafting that communication right now, sir. It will be distributed to all employees within the next hour." Excellent. I also want Premier Air to immediately establish a passenger discrimination response fund. Any traveler who experiences discriminatory treatment on our flights should receive immediate financial compensation and a personal apology from senior company leadership. Consider it done, Mr. Williams. The fund will be operational by the end of this week. Marcus hung up the phone and turned back to the crowd of passengers and airport staff. Real change doesn't happen by accident or through good intentions alone. Change happens when people who have power choose to use that power responsibly to create justice and accountability. Today, 3 airline employees lost their jobs because of their discriminatory actions. But more importantly, company policies will be changed and strengthened so that future passengers don't have to experience this type of treatment. The applause was now sustained and enthusiastic. Several passengers approached Marcus to shake his hand personally and share their own stories of experiencing or witnessing airline discrimination. But Marcus had one more surprise that would complete this remarkable transformation of events. A completely new flight crew was already walking toward the gate area. Captain 𝗬𝗓 Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran pilot and one of Premier Air's most respected and decorated aviators, along with an entirely new cabin crew selected for their exemplary customer service records. "Mr. Williams," Captain Rodriguez said with complete professionalism and genuine respect, "I am truly honored to serve as your captain today. My crew and I are fully committed to providing you and every passenger on this flight with the outstanding service that you deserve and that represents the best of Premier Air's values." Marcus smiled genuinely for the first time since arriving at the gate area. "Thank you very much, Captain Rodriguez. I'm looking forward to an excellent flight experience." As Marcus walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, he could hear animated conversations behind him as passengers discussed what they had just witnessed. Social media was already exploding with video footage of the confrontation and its resolution. It was trending nationally on Twitter within the first hour, and the story was being picked up by news outlets across the country. Once aboard the aircraft, Captain Rodriguez announced a public address system that would be remembered by every single passenger on Flight 447 and would later be quoted in news reports about the incident. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Earlier today, we experienced an incident at our gate that absolutely does not represent the values, standards, or character of Premier Air or our parent company, SkyBridge Airlines. We want every passenger on this aircraft to know that discrimination, bias, and prejudicial treatment have absolutely no place on our aircraft, in our company culture, or in our industry. Every passenger deserves dignity, respect, and outstanding service, and that is precisely what we are committed providing today and every single day going forward." The passengers erupted in sustained applause that lasted for over a minute. Marcus settled into seat 2A, the first-class seat that he had legally purchased and rightfully deserved, opened his laptop, and began reviewing his presentation materials for the crucial investor meeting that awaited him in Los Angeles. As Premier Air Flight 447 pushed back from the gate and taxied toward the runway for takeoff, Marcus reflected on the morning's extraordinary events and their broader significance. He had faced discrimination once again, just as he had experienced countless times throughout his professional career and personal life. But this time, unlike so many previous incidents, he had possessed both the power and the platform to address the injustice immediately, directly, and with lasting consequences. His phone was buzzing constantly with text messages and calls from friends, colleagues, business associates, and family members who had already seen the rapidly spreading social media coverage of the confrontation and its dramatic resolution. The overwhelming response was supportive and congratulatory, praising Marcus for his professional handling of an obviously difficult and emotionally charged situation. But Marcus understood that the real victory in this situation was not the viral social media attention, the positive news coverage, or even the immediate termination of the discriminatory employees. The genuine victory was in the comprehensive policy changes that would protect countless future passengers from experiencing similar discrimination and humiliation. 3 hours later, Premier Air Flight 447 landed smoothly at Los Angeles International Airport without any incidents or complications. Captain Rodriguez personally thanked Marcus for his grace and professionalism during the earlier confrontation and expressed her personal commitment to ensuring that Premier Air lived up to its highest standards of customer service and human dignity. As Marcus deplaned and walked through the LAX terminal, he was approached by several fellow passengers who wanted to share their own experiences with airline discrimination and to express their gratitude for his courageous stand against injustice. Their stories were both heartbreaking and motivating. A young Latina businesswoman who had been repeatedly questioned about her first-class upgrades, an elderly black minister who had been asked multiple times to prove his military veteran status, and a successful Middle Eastern entrepreneur who faced additional security screening on every flight regardless of his frequent traveler status. Each personal story reinforced from Marcus why his response had been not just appropriate but necessary. Individual acts of discrimination were symptoms of much larger systemic problems that required comprehensive, systematic solutions implemented at the highest levels of corporate leadership. The investor meeting in Los Angeles exceeded all expectations dramatically. When news of the morning's incident and Marcus's handling of it reached the potential investment partners, they were genuinely impressed by his leadership under pressure and by SkyBridge Airlines' immediate, decisive response to eliminate discrimination. The originally proposed $500 million expansion deal was not only approved unanimously by the investment group, but the partners actually increased their commitment to over $1 billion after witnessing Marcus's principled leadership and crisis management capabilities in real time. But the real, lasting impact of Marcus Williams' 12 minutes of moral courage was just beginning to unfold across the aviation industry and beyond. Within 48 hours, video footage of the gate confrontation had been viewed over 50 million times across all social media platforms combined. Major news outlets, including CNN, NBC, ABC, and Fox News, had picked up the story, with most coverage focusing positively on Marcus's swift corporate response and the broader societal issues of travel discrimination that the incident had highlighted. Other major airlines immediately began comprehensive reviews of their own customer service policies and employee training procedures. Employee bias training programs were rapidly expanded and strengthened across the industry. Aviation industry associations issued strong public statements condemning discrimination and promising improved oversight and accountability measures. Most significantly for future travelers, passengers who had experienced similar discriminatory treatment began speaking out publicly about their experiences. The airline discrimination became a powerful forum for sharing personal stories and demanding systematic changes throughout the entire transportation industry. Marcus received thousands of messages of support and gratitude, but also faced some criticism from individuals who felt that his response had been unnecessarily harsh or that the immediate termination of the 3 employees was an excessive punishment. Several online commenters argued that the airline crew had been following standard procedures, that Marcus should have been more patient and understanding, and that destroying people's careers was a disproportionate response to what they characterized as an honest mistake. Marcus addressed these criticisms directly and comprehensively in a LinkedIn post that would become one of the most widely shared business leadership articles of the entire year. Some people have suggested that my response to yesterday's discrimination was too harsh, that these were fundamentally good people who made an honest mistake, and that I should have been more forgiving and understanding of their position. Let me be absolutely clear about something that apparently needs to be stated explicitly. Discrimination is never, under any circumstances, an honest mistake. When 3 trained, experienced airline professionals independently decided that a black man dressed in casual clothing could not possibly afford a first-class ticket, that was not an accident, an oversight, or a misunderstanding. That was racial bias and discriminatory assumptions in direct action. The post continued with even greater intensity and clarity. For over 30 years, I have built my career and my companies in industry where I was frequently the only black person in boardrooms, executive meetings, and leadership conferences. I have been questioned, challenged, doubted, and underestimated more times than I can count. But I have also learned through hard experience that power without accountability is completely meaningless. When you can create positive change and you choose not to use it, you become complicit in perpetuating the very problems you have the power to solve. Marcus concluded his post with a statement that would be quoted extensively in business schools and leadership training programs. Those 3 employees lost their jobs not because they made an innocent mistake, but because they made a deliberate choice to discriminate. They chose to make assumptions rather than treat all passengers with equal dignity. They chose to humiliate and exclude rather than provide professional service. Every single employee in every service industry needs to understand clearly that choices have real consequences, and discriminatory choices will always result in severe professional consequences. The LinkedIn post received over 2 million views and generated more than 300,000 likes and thousands of substantive comments within the first week of publication. Harvard Business School, Wharton, Stanford, and other top business programs began incorporating the Marcus Williams incident as a detailed case study in corporate leadership, crisis management, and using business power for social justice. 6 months after the incident, the Marcus Williams confrontation had fundamentally transformed standard practices throughout the airline industry. The Department of Transportation issued comprehensive new federal guidelines for preventing and addressing passenger discrimination. Major airlines implemented mandatory unconscious bias training for all employees who interact with customers. Industry oversight groups established new passenger advocacy programs and discrimination reporting systems. Most significantly for the future of air travel, a completely new position was created across the airline industry, Director of Passenger Dignity and Inclusion, with direct responsibility for investigating discrimination complaints, ensuring equitable treatment for all travelers, and implementing proactive measures to prevent bias-based incidents. Marcus was invited to testify before Congress about systemic discrimination in air travel and transportation more broadly. His detailed testimony, supported by extensive documentation and research, led directly to new federal legislation requiring all transportation companies to report discrimination incidents publicly and to implement specific, measurable anti-bias training and accountability measures. The 3 employees who were terminated faced dramatically different outcomes in the aftermath of their discriminatory actions. Janet Morrison struggled significantly to find employment anywhere in the airline or hospitality industries, as word of her involvement in the incident spread throughout professional networks. She eventually moved to an entirely different career field and relocated to another state to escape the professional consequences of her actions. Angela Thompson filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Premier Air and SkyBridge Airlines, claiming that her firing was excessive and that she had been following standard company procedures. However, her lawsuit was quickly dismissed when the legal investigation revealed a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior toward passengers over several years, including multiple formal complaints that had been filed against her by travelers who had experienced similar treatment. Captain Hayes underwent extensive retraining and sensitivity education before eventually finding employment with a much smaller regional airline, where he now serves as an active advocate for diversity, inclusion, and anti-discrimination policies throughout the aviation industry. His experience became a cautionary tale that is now used in pilot training programs to illustrate the career-ending consequences of discriminatory decision-making. Meanwhile, the airline employees who replaced the terminated crew members on Flight 447 all received commendations, promotions, and recognition for their professionalism during an extremely difficult situation. Captain Rodriguez was promoted to chief pilot for Premier Air's West Coast operations, and several of the replacement flight attendants advanced to senior positions within the company. Marcus Williams continues to fly regularly for business, often on his own airline network, but also frequently on competitor carriers, always observing how passengers are treated and ensuring that the industry-wide changes sparked by his experience are being implemented effectively. He established an anonymous reporting system for airline discrimination that allows passengers to report incidents confidentially, and he personally reviews every complaint that is submitted. The story of Marcus Williams and Premier Air Flight 447 has become legendary in corporate leadership circles as a definitive example of how business leaders can and should use their power to create immediate justice and long-term systemic change. It demonstrates conclusively that swift, decisive action in response to discrimination can transform entire industries and create lasting protection for vulnerable individuals. But for Marcus personally, the most deeply satisfying outcome of his 12-minute confrontation has been hearing from thousands of travelers who no longer fear discriminatory treatment when they fly. Young professionals report flying first class without being questioned about their tickets. Elderly passengers describe being treated with consistent respect regardless of their appearance or attire. Families share stories of traveling together without anxiety about being profiled or singled out for different treatment. Marcus Williams' refusal to accept discrimination quietly, his strategic use of corporate power for justice, and his unwavering commitment to systematic change prove definitively that individual courage and moral leadership can indeed transform entire industries and create a more equitable society for everyone. The enduring lesson of Marcus Williams in Flight 447 is crystal clear. When people of conscience who possess real power choose to use that power responsibly for justice, discrimination and prejudice simply cannot survive. When leaders demand dignity and respect for everyone, not just people who share their background or appearance, genuine and lasting change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. That is the powerful, lasting legacy of Marcus Williams' 12 minutes of moral courage at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Absolute proof that individual bravery, combined with institutional power and unwavering commitment to justice, can indeed create a better, more equitable world for all people. If this incredible story of courage, justice, and transformation inspired you, please share with others who need to hear this message. Hit that like button to support more content about standing up for what's right. Subscribe for more amazing true stories of people who changed the world. And let me know in a comment about a time when you or someone you know stood up against injustice. Because just like Marcus Williams taught us through his example, sometimes the most ordinary moments become extraordinary opportunities for positive change. And sometimes just 12 minutes of moral courage can transform an entire industry and inspire millions of people around the world.